I'm Danielle Royston, and this is Telco in 20. We're hitting the road. I've been in London celebrating Telco in 20's first anniversary and chatting it up with those cloud lovers, Scott Bicheno and Iain Morris from the Telecoms.com podcast. That's right. I went to the home turf of the cloud skeptics. And I was psyched to be a guest on the other big podcast in Telco. I mean, if you're going to listen to two podcasts in telecom, it's Telco in 20 and Telecoms.com, right? Those guys like to record their podcasts on Friday afternoons and pop open a couple of beers and chat about what's going on in telco. So I brought some killer craft beers all the way from Austin, Texas, to loosen them up for our chat about the public cloud. And so we sat down to talk about why the public cloud is so awesome for telco. This episode brings that conversation to you. Fair warning, the Telecoms.com podcast usually runs about an hour and change. Very different from our 20-minute podcast. So settle in and get ready to listen to our fun debate about the public cloud coming to telco. And don't forget that I'm hosting a live coding workshop as part of TM Forum's Digital Transformation World Series, where you can learn how to build applications with the TM Forum open APIs to Togi and AWS. So send me a DM on Twitter at TelcoDR or message me on LinkedIn and I'll get you on the list. And now, here it is, a rare dual release Telco in 20 and Telecoms.com podcast. Let's take 120.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. For the second week running, we've got a very special guest, and this is the much-trailed Danielle Royston. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here at long last.
I am psyched. I feel a little bit like Obama going on to Fox News with you guys.
Right.
Since I am like the public cloud. You guys tend to write a little bit about the public cloud.
Am I Tucker Carlson? I don't mind. I'm all right with that. So obviously one thing we've flagged up, whenever we talk about a public cloud, Danielle's name often comes up because you're a sort of self-proclaimed public cloud evangelist, if I've positioned you correctly.
I'm the public cloud cheerleader.
There we go. Look at this. She's bought props.
Right.
That rah, rah, rah.
Right? I mean,
Okay.
I got that guy. I got, you know,
Look at this.
we're number one. Right? We're number one. Go public cloud. Yes.
Excellent. Well, that is... we couldn't ask any more of an evangelist, except for some kind of pulpit and a Bible.
Right. I skipped the outfits a little bit chilly today in London,
well,
so
okay.
no
Right.
cheerleader outfit for you. But I do have my props.
Right. So you did have one. You just didn't put it
I
out.
just did it pretty good. I do. No, honestly, I play tennis.
So you got a tennis
and I have
outfit.
tennis skirts.
Actually, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I hear you were playing tennis yesterday.
I was playing tennis.
Who were you playing
yesterday.
tennis with?
I was playing with Ray LeMaitre.
No way.
Yeah.
Is he any good?
He challenged me.
He challenged you?
He challenged me,
That's
and he
quite a
wanted
Ray
to
thing to
play
do,
a proper
match.
Yeah.
Right.
So we played 2 sets.
How good's Ray?
What was the score?
He's pretty good.
He's
and
all right, is he?
yeah,
Oh, you
he's
knew
pretty
that, did
good.
you?
I knew he played
Right.
to half
good
this.
at
I mean, he's good
table
at
tennis.
table tennis.
I know he's good at table tennis.
Yep.
He's certainly humiliated me in that one.
He has really good court sense, and
Yeah,
he's faster than you think he is.
And you think an old git would be.
Well, I didn't say that, you did, but but just, typically as you get older, it's tough to move side to side or front and back, and I tested all of those sort of
Right.
elements, and he did
He was
a
getting
good
to the
job.
ball.
Yeah, covering the court.
Wow.
So yeah, it
what
was
was the
fun.
score? Come on.
I won 6-2, 6-1.
That's all right. You got a few games.
Yeah.
Haven't you? I mean, you were pro, were you, or semi-pro?
I'm not a pro.
You're highly ranked at ITF level. though,
Yeah,
aren't you?
I played university tennis and then took 20 years off because
Right.
mom worked.
Bit of a gap.
Yeah. And then decided to get back into it, and sort of that competitive bug doesn't ever leave you. I
Right.
think it's just part of your DNA. And so I was like, what does it take to get ranked in Texas and then in the United States and then the world? And
Wow.
so pre-COVID, I achieved my highest ranking of being 20th in the
Wow.
world.
Nice one.
I mean, it's a little bit, women that play tournaments that are 50 or older, right? It's a little bit of a
it's still pretty
narrowing
good.
of
You're
the
yourself
field
down
there. Yeah, but just recently I was
I'm
at...
pretty sure I'd get nowhere near the top. I'm not even 50 yet, although I am soon. Have you heard? I don't think I'd get anywhere near the
No,
top
but I
20.
was just in Croatia last month participating in the ITF
I saw your
World Team
tweets. Yeah.
tennis tournament, which is the only tournament that I know of that you can't just apply and play in. You have to be selected by your country. So yeah, I was competing with the best in the world in a team event, and it was super fun. And so I think Ray saw that and was like, okay, I want to.
I'm having some of that actually.
Yeah, so we had a really good time. It was windy. It was rainy.
Was it just a laugh, or did he make a sort of telecom TV thing of it?
He made a
Like,
telecom TV.
Is he going to publish?
We did an
highlights?
interview on the courts, and we mixed it up with some tennis stuff, and so I think they'll publish that shortly.
Excellent.
But it was super fun. We had some champagne and Pimm's, and
good
it was
stuff.
really. I mean,
Ray's starting to steal our thunder. We're going to need to raise our game.
Yes.
If even Ray's drinking on camera.
He was not drinking on camera. I mean, we had to keep. I mean, I think he really was. I mean, thinking seriously about the tennis. I won't.
Yeah.
I cannot drink and then play. So,
No,
so I wasn't drinking. I was like, well, I mean, I have to
That
beat
might be
him.
where I've gone wrong all these years.
Drink first, then play.
So God, that's 2 balls. Anyway,
I'll have to get you to play my son.
yeah. Have you
Is
heard about
he-
his son?
He's about 7 in the country in his age group.
Oh
so,
wow! I'm sure he'll destroy me.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
he's good. He's
How old is
trying
he?
to be. He's 17.
Oh, yeah, game over. There's no way.
But it'd still be kind of.
I guess no. He's gonna hit so hard. Is he tall? I mean,
he wasn't tall, but he's almost my height now, so
Yeah.
he's sort of going up.
yeah.
But,
I mean,
helps.
there's he's that good and male and tall.
yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
can't play.
I
against him,
can't break a
but,
serve. It'll be really.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
he's-
tiny.
yeah,
I'm
it's-
5'4". I don't know what that is in the metric system, but
We use feet and inches.
oh, sweet.
Yeah.
But the
So
world.
You're almost a foot
Yeah.
shorter than I am.
Yeah,
I'm 6'3".
yeah. My husband's 6'3". Right? We look ridiculous
Okay, so you're used to.
in photographs.
to look
But
at
I
lanky people.
actually brought you guys gifts.
Oh, bribe of
Right.
the week.
Right, right. It is a little bit. I got to do this. So first of all, I brought you a Yeti. It was your birthday, I think.
Oh, is that for
Wait,
me?
you
That
get to
Yeti?
keep the
Oh,
Yeti?
This is for you.
I was
This is
asking
your
Declan
birthday,
about it.
never
It's being all
I know.
shifty. I
He
was wondering
being
why.
shifty. So Yeti. So in
Those are amazing.
Cool.
So in Japanese
nice.
business.
This has been a very profitable birthday so far.
In Japanese business, you're supposed to bring gifts from your hometown.
Right.
Right? Not necessarily like fancy gifts, but that you were thoughtful. And so Yeti is actually from Austin.
Right. Cool.
Right? And so they're known for their tumblers and their coolers, mostly for hunters, right? Go out into the whatever and shoot things. Very
And then
Texan
and
of
then
me.
get pissed after.
But maybe like a thing.
You know who's a big advocate of Yeti, yeah?
Rogan.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Are you a fan of
We're
this
both
guy?
big. Me and Pierre are both big Rogan.
So the
fans.
other thing I did
at
was
that.
I brought you guys some beers. I realized we had like
Wow.
a shit ton of beers here.
So these
Well,
are
that's all
cold.
right, man.
They're cold.
They're cold. Look, you've
Wow.
got bits of ice going
I
on.
do.
in there. This is pro.
So the first beer I brought you guys is made by a pizza house in Austin called Electric Jellyfish.
Did you
These
bring,
are beers with
did you bring this
interesting
over
names.
from the States?
I
or
did.
you
I
find
lugged it
some-
personally.
Oh, you're so thoughtful.
So I
That's
brought
very-
one
that is
for.
very, very
I brought
kind.
three.
Now I feel bad being a dick about a public cloud.
No, exactly, exactly. The second beer I brought
Killing you
you,
with kindness.
the second beer I brought you is called Hell Yes, and so I hope
Hell yeah.
by the end of the pod, you guys are saying Hell Yes to the public cloud.
Right, I see. Well, we'll see.
Okay.
So that's a good. I should have researched exactly what kind of beers, and then I did bring.
You don't
some,
need to research. As
And
long
then
as it's got
I brought
beer
some
written on it.
gluten-free beer because I didn't know.
Okay, and
if we were
Pierre
gonna be able
sorted
to
you out
find
with
it.
one or two.
And so this one is called Sun Eater. I'll rename it Cloud Eater.
Ooh,
Sorry, there's ice.
That's
up there.
all right, don't worry.
okay.
But yeah, sorry. There
That's
you
how
go.
good the Yetis are. See? The
I mean-
ice has a
Yeah,
mouth.
Well,
Ice
I
is-
didn't
the
bring
ice
it with
is
the
so cold,
ice.
it's
I put the ice in
Oh,
this
that's
morning.
brilliant,
But
Daniel.
there you go. This is a present for you.
That's incredibly kind of you. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
All the way from Austin,
Cool.
Texas.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, go
Well,
Austin.
the beers, thank
I
you.
reckon we'll have that on the pods every week.
No,
We'll
you
get the
should
beers
use
out of the
it.
fridge and just keep it in there.
Yes. Right?
yes.
Someone can be responsible for putting the.
That means we
This
can have
is
like
now the Telecoms.com podcast.
Sponsored by Yeti.
that means we can have like 3-hour Rogan podcasts without running out of cold beer.
Yeah. So if you need, or just whatever. So
Well, that's
can
brilliant.
hold. I think
Very
it's
cool.
advertised to hold 6, but I have 8 in
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So.
No, that's
Electric Jellyfish. No, highly. Everyone raves about this guy.
yeah, that's 6.5%. I might have to.
Drink
And it's
it.
a big tin of 6.5%. It could. I might have to wait.
And then-
wait till the second half of the pod
And
for
then
that.
this is from the Austin. That's a Pine House Pizza. They have like a little microbrewery. And then this is from Austin Beer Garden.
Uh huh.
So there you go.
What's that? Is that a bit more manageable? What's the damage on that one, Pierre?
What does it say? 4.5. I
No,
have
so-
that right now.
Go for it. Good
So
man.
there you go. Give it a taste.
Brilliant.
So there you go.
Well, I promise
Gotta
I'll
warm you
I'll
up.
crack that one
Gotta
open in a
warm
bit.
you up before we talk about the cloud.
That's very cool. Okay, I think we've spoken
Thank
quite
you
a
for
lot of
the
shit,
beers.
haven't
You're
we?
welcome.
We better crack on with it.
Yeah.
What we're going to speak about this week. So obviously, public cloud is Danielle's thing. Ian and I have fairly sort of overt opinions as to the pros and cons of it. And so we finally get a chance to thrash that out in person. So we can talk about that and find out a bit more about what you do.
Yeah.
And things like Mobile Congress,
Yeah.
which, as you pointed out, we jokingly called Danielle Royston Congress.
The
a little
DRC.
while- DRC.
Yeah, I love that. That was like actually the goal.
Right.
And I think I succeeded.
That's a branding win.
Yes.
And then we'll just take that as far as it takes us. But we have got a couple of other things we might chat about in terms of the week's news. We finally had the conclusion of the Huawei CFO Meng. What's her surname again?
Wanzhou.
Meng Wanzhou. She's been sort of in limbo in Canada for a couple of years while the US tried to extradite her, and in the end they just gave up and just went, oh, fuck it, go on then, back to China with you. So off she went.
Or leadership changed in the country. But yeah.
Could be. Yeah, well, it presumably was Trump's bright idea in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Not to get political.
It was just down the pile on Biden's to-do list.
I know.
Here we go.
It was like deal with Ming.
Yeah, it's her turn.
And we're not. I don't feel inclined to get into minutiae of the legalities of it, because I don't think it actually came down to law in the end. It came down to politics and international diplomacy, and it's the international diplomacy side of it that interests me. And there are one or two other things that have happened in the last week or so that point to what I hope is a sort of positive shift in terms of international diplomacy. Let's see. And then the only other thing that I fancy chatting about is sort of big tech or big internet companies getting more into consumer devices in the form of Facebook and the metaverse, and Amazon, not AWS, Amazon, the sort of, I guess that you'd call it the retail side, the e-tail side, getting into robots and sort of domestic IoT and all that sort of thing. And I've got some thoughts on how desirable that is. And you can imagine along the lines of my usual dystopian paranoia. So that's that. And just to remind you that if you're watching it on the site or on YouTube or on Facebook, you can also listen to it on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and loads of other podcasting platforms. Cool. Right, I better get this star sorted so I can get onto that bad boy. So Danielle, so here we are. Why don't we start by? So you were a few years ago. You're CEO of a company called Optiva. Is that right?
Yeah, formerly Redney. I think a lot of people know it as Redney, but yeah.
And
renamed it.
then when that finished, you started up. What's your company called now?
Well, I have two that I'm kind of involved with. So I got Telco DR, which is my Twitter handle.
Yeah.
Please follow me. And the other one is Totogi, which is
You should,
the software.
before we forget, you should plug your own podcast as well.
Yeah, the Telco in 20 podcast.
So
It's the other Telco podcast.
The other Telco podcast. And you're actually planning to get some of this and sort of whack it into one of your podcasts, aren't you?
Yeah, it's gonna be a dual drop. I think that's right.
Is that the technical term?
I don't know if that's a technical term. I
We
just
don't know. Maybe it's an American
coined it.
thing.
We're gonna drop them at the same time
Sounds
on
more like
Monday.
a drug dealing type of thing.
No, it sounds like a Beyonce. Yeah, it's like Beyonce and Kanye,
I've
like
just been
double
rewatching
drop.
The Wire, so I'm really up on the
Okay,
parlance.
you're into the
Yeah.
sort of drug dealing lingo.
That's it. Just a lingo. I don't actually deal. Thank you, my bosses at Informer. Okay, so Telco DR, yes. So you got that pod, and you talk about telecoms-y stuff.
I talk on my podcast. I focus on how telco is going to move to the public cloud, and it's called Telco in 20 because I think that's going to take 20-ish years. It's going to take a long time.
Okay, so
And
we need
then
to start panicking yet.
And the podcast is usually about 20-minute episodes, right?
Okay.
Really geared towards telco executives. So
Okay, cool. And you said you've got another business, or is that?
Totogi.
Well, remind us. I don't think I was aware of that.
Yeah, Totogi is a software business, and it's building all the software you need if you're a telco that's hell-bent on going to the public cloud. You need tools that really know how to use the public cloud the right way. And so we've launched a charger, because that's like the heart of monetization, and we've launched a BSS. And so that's not all of it. It's going to be a lot more. We think that if you're let's take like Dish, for example, who's kind of gone really all in
All
on
in.
the public. The most that we.
I think I put it that way precisely in a headline
The
once.
right cloud as well, yeah?
Well, yeah. I mean, we
We'll
can
get
debate
onto
that
that.
too.
We'll get onto that.
Yeah, and Totogi's. Yeah, there's reasons for that, but if you're a Dish and you go shopping for software, right, and the things that you need for that, let's just say that that's your strategy. You have a shopping list, and so Totogi's going to build all that software for you, and for those people that are all in on the public cloud and don't have the trepidations of it, right? Get over it, and we can talk.
So a charger would be the sort of stuff that you might associate with someone like OpenNet or
And
charging
the software
charging,
vendor.
that's
My previous employer, Optiva, was a charging company,
yeah.
and so I love charging. Like some people thought it was a dead commodity. I think it's the most exciting thing.
And
out
that's charging as in billing as opposed
as
to
in
charging
rating,
up your phone.
yeah. Well, no, remember nights and weekends? If you're as old as me, like minutes. You're
right,
supposed
I
to
see.
call on nights and weekends because it was
Yeah, so
cheaper.
sort of
That's rating,
Tariffs
AKA.
and bespoke
I
yeah,
billing.
there's a software
yeah,
that does all that.
Yeah. Well, I always just group that in BSS. Or,
It's
am I
part of
wrong to
BSS,
do that?
though.
Okay, right.
Well, it's kind of like a little. It's like the one thing that kind of spans OSS, right? It's just sort of.
Okay.
Sometimes in organizations, network owns it, and sometimes in organizations, IT owns it. But it really spans because it sits on the network to like figure out,
Yeah.
quota and do you have enough
And
credits to get it to go through.
And the Totogi thing, I mean, you made quite a big investment in that, didn't you? This was I think,
$100
about
million,
$100 million.
yeah.
I don't know,
but-
good for you, man.
I can afford to bring you beers.
But there was also quite,
Costs even more than that Yeti.
but there's also others in mind, other kind of companies that you
Yeah,
might.
so I mean,
move-
your question was, who am I? What am I doing? And so, I have this huge vision. It's kind of why I'm here. I think that it's a mega trend. It's coming to telco. You can't really stop it. You got to think about what you're going to, as a telco executive, as a telco company, you got to decide what you're going to do about it, right? Are you going to avoid it? Are you going to use it? How much are you going to use it? And so I think, number one, with an idea like that, there needs to be an evangelist in the industry. And no one really is the public cloud cheerleader. So I was like, there was a gap, and I was like, that's going to be me.
Just a slightly cheeky question. If it's so inevitable, why does it need to be evangelized at all?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion about it. And so, I mean, a couple of years ago, everyone told me I was wrong. It would never happen.
Right.
And now here we are seeing people using it in different ways.
And
And
so, like every month we're writing
I
some
would-
story about another operator's gone all in. On the
Yeah,
cloud,
I mean,
or
maybe
whatever.
at some point I will have to stop. But I think there's still a lot of, I'd be happy.
Maybe in 20 years.
Maybe.
But it
Maybe
is-
I hope it doesn't take that long.
But it is very early days, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, I know.
You say it's early days, but we keep hearing about all this.
There's not a lot of telecom in the public cloud. I mean, we raise concerns, I think, because we see
Saw
it
it
going
early.
that way, and you see operators doing these all-in-one deals, and you see the structure of the market. But there's very, very little telecom at the moment in the public cloud. I mean, it's probably gone a lot more slowly than other industries, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I mean, I think correct, and I think it's going to take a long time. And so, if you look continent by continent, like South America, really, I mean, there's been some partnerships, but not like North America and Western Europe,
Yeah.
right? We haven't heard anything really about Africa, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Hyperscalers, there's not a lot of hyperscaler activity on that continent,
Yeah.
right? Middle East. Right, a little bit of strategic agreements, but not a lot of movement, and so it is early days. Right?
But even in North America, it's only. I mean, Dish has announced this big deal, but it's an innovator anyway. It's a greenfield network, and then the only other one really is AT&T with its plans to move the whole 5G operation in. The others haven't really.
Well,
as far as
no,
I'm
Verizon
aware.
I think has done a lot, but they're
Right.
they're using like AWS for edge stuff with wavelength. They're
Yeah.
using GCP for some AI stuff,
Yeah.
and so they're kind of splitting their bets a little bit. And so I think T-Mobile does stuff as well, but it's obviously a little bit easier in North America because the hyperscalers are from the United States, and so that's a
Yeah.
little bit easy. But like I think in Europe, it's starting to pick up steam, and Asia, I think KDDI just signed a deal with. Well, I don't know if it's just, but with AWS wavelength. So I think the experimentation is
Yeah, we
starting
see
to
more
happen.
bits and bobs. It's a bit more piecemeal over here in Europe. I mean, I suppose it's going to be easier for a greenfield operator
Yeah.
like Dish to go all in and just go fuck it from the
I
start.
think they're turning up in a lot of deals. Like you see, Scott and I write every week almost, it seems, as you just said, about AWS doing an edge deal with Vodafone or something. But there's a difference between that and actually having, putting all of your workloads into the cloud, which
Right.
is sort of what you're talking about, isn't it? Moving that and embracing it completely.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely talk about the edge, and I think that a lot of people focus on the network, obviously, because that's where the CapEx expense is. But I talk about IT side, right? I talk about all those workloads. And so I think there's thousands of applications, not even like the super critical ones, right? That I think you should just like move them over to the public cloud.
And what would be the argument for doing it? Because there's various views on this, I know, and there's one. I mean, I guess when this came along originally, the idea of sort of running things from the cloud, a lot of it was sort of, as I understand it, it was small Silicon Valley companies that wouldn't necessarily want to go and spend money on their own Hewlett-Packard servers.
Therefore, or IT teams.
Yeah, and therefore you to sort of do it through the cloud was a cost-effective way of doing it. But one criticism would be as you get bigger, and it's like when you set up your own taxi company and it gets big enough, you don't want to hire cars, you actually want to buy your own fleet. So,
right.
I mean, does that apply when you're a really big operator and you're scaling up? Are you still seeing benefits in terms of costs and other things from making this move?
I do. I think the cost benefits is an easy, obvious thing. But I think the other side that people tend to forget about is the amount of organizational energy a company has, right? Which is the sum of your people times the hours in a day times the weeks in a year.
Yeah.
And what percentage of that group is focused on mundane tasks like updating servers and keeping them, secure and, sort of dealing with all that. And could you reallocate that into people focused on driving better experiences for your customers, right? And so how much of that energy do you want to do? And I saw a really good Twitter thread around this that basically you get the opportunity to, one of the hardest things to build and find are great people. And so when AWS or GCP or Azure is letting you get access to talent and you pay by the minute, right? And it is talent, right? At the end of the day, managing the servers and managing all those workloads for you. That's such a rare thing to have that opportunity. Take it when it presents itself and then reallocate your organizational energy to be focusing on what matters, which is your own business.
So that point one in favour of public cloud is efficiency. You'll find I'll concede most of them. Mm-hmm. Because the points in favour and the point against are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
So point one in favour is efficiency, and I totally get that. And it's not just smaller companies. It's not just lowering the barrier to entry to certain sectors for smaller companies. It's also larger legacy companies creating efficiencies by getting rid of their existing data centres and just going, fuck it, let's get Amazon to do it or whatever.
Yeah, you're just not buying... it's not good news for Hewlett-Packard, is it, really? Because they're only selling then to
or
three
Dell
companies.
or Intel.
No,
Well,
I mean,
perhaps,
but you go look at the earnings calls of like those guys in Intel and AMD about the cloud.
Yeah, they're just flogging it to.
Well, they want to be able.
hyperscalers.
They want to sell their their chips to those guys, right?
Yeah.
That's. I mean,
But you wonder, presumably, with greater efficiency comes less duplication and redundancy. So presumably, while they could sell to like a football field size data center at hyperscaler, that might theoretically, I'm just thinking out loud here, that might theoretically be less than selling to 100 different people who were having to do their own thing. But either way, I mean, I also take your point about the inevitability of it. I think Apple, and you were just showing your lovely shiny new iPhone 13.
Yeah, my new 13 Max.
I remember covering, when I was more consumer tech focused, I remember covering them when they were coming out with products that were cannibalizing their own successful products that they came out. I don't know if it's the iPhone or maybe it was the iPhone without a modem. What they used to call that, the iPod Deluxe or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was cannibalizing other stuff they had. But, they'd always talk about people like sort of Kodak and Polaroid and people who held on to their legacy shit for too long until it was too late. And then other people had stepped in when they could have got there. So, yeah, in terms of inevitability, I get all that as well. But before I sort of get into the pushback side of it, so point one, efficiencies. What about the extra wins that you get on top of efficiency from being a telco in the public cloud? Why don't you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people see the public cloud as data center outsourcing, right? And Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, has quotes out there where he was like, it's outsourcing. Why would I outsource this when I have it in-house? And over the course of probably like 6 or 7 years, he starts to realize that there's technical capability, software that the public cloud vendors provide that he can't buy and put in his own data centers. And that software is available as almost Lego pieces that you can assemble together and reduce the amount of code that his developers have to write. Right? You can assemble these Lego pieces into new applications and new offerings in minutes, right? In hours, which previously used to take months or maybe years. And so the speed of business, right? Feature velocity, right? He could add it to old legacy systems without having to go through an upgrade. He could put out new ideas and experiment with them in smaller batches and see if the idea works. And he's like, aha, I get it.
Isn't some of that an argument in favor of the cloud and virtualization and softwareization in general?
I mean, yeah, but these are tools that these guys have been using in their own businesses, like either Google in search or Amazon in retail, that they've now commercialized and made available for anyone to leverage, right?
Yeah.
And they're sharing their innovation with the world.
So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, it's all there.
Right, you're like, hey, I need to do some crazy AI or machine learning on a big, huge set of data. Instead of having to figure out all this stuff out or like use a new kind of database that scales automatically, I can just use it. And so I think that's the piece that people miss about I think even still in telco, people miss that, right? They kind of focus on the efficiencies of the cost, or I don't have to have my own team, or I can shut down data centers. But once they start building with these Lego pieces, and we're going to do it in a week. I'm participating in TM Forum's Digital Transformation World Series. We're going to create a new feature in an application in 20 minutes and code it live. And
Are there a lot
are
of people, just out of interest, that you know, because we talked about the job side of it before, that would just be at a telco involved in looking after it? It's not just about cutting out on the equipment that you're spending, because then you're going to rent it through AWS, but you've actually got big teams involved in just looking after all this stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's new skills that you have to have that I don't think telco really has a lot of, and it's the hottest tech skill out there. You're competing against big names like Google, AWS, and Azure to attract it to a telco. The compensation plans of a telco versus AWS, where they're giving out stock and equity. I mean, that's going to be really hard to build those teams. But yeah, I think that when people get those skills, their value in the market goes up 20 to 30%. I think the types of skills no longer are just pure technology, but technologists need to understand the financial impact of a decision of, how are we going to, AWS will offer different licensing packages. So you could license it for, it's a reserved instance and you hold on to it for a period of time, or sometimes it's not. And you're willing for that machine to go away and take a little bit of risk. It's cheaper. Yeah. Right. And so kind of thinking about, when do I want a reserved instance that's more expensive because this is a workload that can't ever go down. Whereas this is a financial system that's not really used on the weekends or nights, and it's a little bit cheaper. And so that combination of technical prowess and understanding how to evaluate the technology with the financial implications of those decisions is a whole new skill that we haven't begun to talk about, right? Yeah. So, a great example is just yesterday saw AWS announced Graviton 2 is available on Lambda workloads. Lambda is serverless, right? And so this is not Kubernetes, right? But this is kind of another type of application. And so you get 34% price improvement if you move your workloads off of Intel chips onto Amazon's proprietary custom Graviton 2 chips. And so you're priced by...
God, I don't think I even realised they had their own chips. Did you realise that?
Yeah, because we talked about it before. Those are the ones that Dish wants to use in its... They're ARM-based chips that Dish wants to use in its SOAP and RAN rollout.
I knew a couple of weeks ago.
How old?
What's your name again? No, so what were you going to say?
How old, I wonder.
Yeah. How old are you going to be, Scott?
I mean, if I get the benefits and everything. If I was going to start raising objections, and I read about this a lot, I'd say that the thing that strikes me that's odd about the way telecom is approaching this at the moment, perhaps, is there seems to be this preoccupation with diversifying the market in lots of different areas, and they're very, very concerned about being overly reliant, for instance, on companies like Ericsson and Huawei and Nokia, and you even see that in some of the bits of the equipment market. And the irony is that maybe there's not much of a concern because they haven't really gone into the public cloud at the moment, but it seems to me that they should be thinking, well, do we replace that type of lock-in, if you like, with a different type of lock-in where we do a deal with AWS and we've put all of our systems into its public cloud, and there aren't really that many alternatives. And from talking to people, it sounds like switching between AWS and Microsoft might be even harder than it is to kind of swap out a mobile radio access network and change to Huawei. And I suppose that would be my number one kind of if I was going to push back on it.
You kicked off the pushbacks phase.
Yeah, I mean, if I was going to be awkward about it and say, well, I get the benefits, but here's why I'd sort of raise concerns about it, that would be my number one, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think what that leads to is this thinking around building my workloads in a way that I can repatriate them back somewhere or move them easily.
Right.
And I think that leads you to choosing tools and systems that can be moved, right? You don't pick a proprietary database of Amazon, or Spanner. I think you wrote an article about this.
Yeah. Well,
right?
that wasn't something I knew. I actually talked to James Crawshaw, who's, James.
I know
James, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right. So Spanner's a proprietary database of Google, but like DynamoDB is a proprietary. They all have their proprietary. Cosmos DB is Azure, right?
Yep.
They all have these proprietary, not just databases, but the Graviton 2 chips, right? They don't exist in any other public cloud.
Yeah.
And so I think the danger of that is like, okay, well, we're going to keep our workloads on Intel and give up a 40% price improvement on our workloads, right? Needing less machines or needing less time on those machines, right? Because I want to stay agnostic and I want to be able to move. And, you have that problem today, right, with Oracle or with Amdocs. You can't switch off of those guys easily.
Right.
You have it with your kit. You're always going to have this. And so
vendor lock-in.
You're always going to have, you are, right? And so I think with the public cloud, with it being API based, like all of the services are API based, almost always there's a mapping, of there's a database like Spanner at Azure and at AWS.
Yep.
And so, you'd have to update it and stuff like that. I don't think it's impossible.
Yeah.
It's possible. But I wouldn't go, I'm scared of that lock-in, and so I'm going to build my workloads in a way that they can move at any time. And I think you give up a lot of the benefits of the public cloud when you do that. And so if that's where you're going to end up, I'm like, keep everything on-premise then.
Right.
But that speaks to the core objection, pushback, concern that Iain and I have discussed on the pod. So you seem to be saying, I'm doing a bit of active listening here, make sure I've understood you correctly. You seem to be saying that if you're going to get the best out of public cloud, you've got to be all in. And then that feeds our concern about being all in and surrendering that much control to a third party. I mean, the one I've got, as you may have gathered, because I know you've listened to a few pods, as you may have gathered, I'm things like sort of freedom of speech, censorship, civil liberties, that sort of thing are a big thing for me for whatever reason. And there was, at the start of the year, there was this social media platform called Parler, which I didn't particularly use, but I was pleased it existed as an alternative to Twitter, Facebook, etc. And then it got branded as Trumpist or far right or whatever terms we use to conveniently other people. And
Cancel
culture. Exactly. And then one thing led to another, and AWS kicked them off. And that to me, and I'm not that bothered about Parler in and of itself, but that to me, it was symptomatic of the almost infinite power that the platform has, and then you're saying that you got to go all in. They're not going to kick off Vodafone or something. But they could. I mean, it'd be a weird business decision to kick off a big multinational as opposed to a fringe little social media platform. Well, they could
raise
platform.
prices is another one, I suppose, isn't it? That once, at the moment, I know you talk about the cost savings and the efficiencies, but once everybody's on these platforms, and there's only sort of, we're never going to use Chinese platforms, are we? Probably.
But less likely than ever right now, isn't it?
So
the other clouds are pretty far behind these.
Well, you talked about that as well. Oracle and who's the other one? There's only
IBM is fake. I call it fake cloud because it's not really. It's not, I don't know how an infrastructure company lost an infrastructure play to a retail company like Amazon, but IBM totally missed the boat on that.
That is a good point. How did they? Do you think they were just slow?
Yeah,
to recognise the opportunity.
I was reading. Was I reading?
Into this one?
Jeff,
go for it. Electric jellyfish, baby.
It's 6.5.
Yeah, fucking have it, mate.
Or do you want the other Hell Yes?
Well, there's some more in the Yeti.
Since I'm
I think I should have an electric jellyfish.
Okay, great. Go for it. Maybe,
What was the Hell Yes like?
Oh, very good.
Yeah?
Very good.
Is that a proper pale ale that we like drinking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Cool.
approved. And I'll have to bring them more.
Well, we've got 2 of each left in the
put
Yeti here.
Put in the order when I come. I'll be back in December for the Great Telco Debate. So, coming back.
I keep remembering
Who
that's
does the Great
it's
Telco
Telecom
Debate?
TV now.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
a
Oh, did they?
Telecom TV thing, the Great Telco Debate?
Yeah, they used to be separate.
I'm going to
but,
be there with my pom-poms.
Cool. Well, you're welcome back. You got an open invitation.
Okay, cool.
We'll have round 2.
Yeah, I'll bring more beers.
Yeah,
I had to research
definitely
it.
got an
I had
open
to ask
invitation.
people. Like, I have like beer drinking friends that are experts. I'm like, which one would you bring? Do you like it? Well, I have one question before digress.
Yeah.
What are they called? Sours. Do you
Not
like?
a fan of sours.
I thought it was
Sours?
It
risky.
tastes a bit like vomit.
I don't think I've had one.
Sour beers.
Oh, yeah, I know them. Nah, not
yeah,
so
I
much.
decided they were like, do they like sours? And I was like, ooh, what is a sour? And I was like, ooh, I don't.
The
It's
That's
almost like a
Milkshakes,
beer that's not been well
milkshakes.
maintained in a British pub.
Do you know, while we're going off on the tangent, I just remembered when I first met, in inverted commas, Danielle. This is the first time we've met face to face. First time we met. So Danielle,
This is a great story.
Does a PR through Babel, who we've mentioned a few times on this pod. In fact, they're the only of the 3 PR agencies that sort of really got to know us. They're the only ones since Elena was on last week that haven't been on the pod.
Yeah.
So Ian, Narelle, Katie. I mean, Declan's outside.
Yeah.
They're all welcome if they fancy. I mean, the thing we do on the pod, which I had a feeling we'd be fine on it, but the reason we don't get sort of regular execs, I get incoming stuff all the time going. My VP of
would
this,
love to
that, and
be
the other
on.
would love to come on, and it's like they've got to be someone who's up for the chat.
Yeah.
Figured you would be, and you've definitely proven yourself to be.
I brought props.
But one of the reasons I figured you would be is because this anecdote, the first sort of PR thing that Danielle did to sort of try and introduce herself to sort of UK press, I guess.
This is so embarrassing.
Was this? Well, it wasn't embarrassing. It was an interesting evening though. There was this thing. This is while we were in lockdown. Quite early, wasn't it? This was about a year or so ago.
Yeah, I want to say it was like maybe July, August.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were all semi-lockdown. We were still in that sort of initial phase of what the fuck's going on with coronavirus. And so we did this remote thing where you hired this professional chef.
Mm-hmm.
You sent everyone to their house this box of ingredients,
Yep.
including a couple of decent bottles of wine, I seem to remember.
Yes.
And then we all had to cook. We had to set up a Zoom in our kitchen, and we all had to cook
with the chef.
And we all had to cook with the chef, and.
It was a total disaster.
Well, I don't think it was. I mean, you tell me what you think it was, but
I mean,
the
it was
only
a
thing,
disaster.
The biggest,
But that's still fun.
the biggest criticism I have on it is that the chef dwelt too long on minutiae, like just making a sort of béarnaise type of sauce or something like that.
Correct.
Took half an hour.
Wow.
Correct.
And obviously, if he'd been more pragmatic, and he would have just
Shipped
sent
us.
sent
Shipped
us some
us.
pre-made
Okay,
béarnaise or something.
béarnaise
Everybody
sauce.
assumed
was
everyone
the,
had skills.
No,
He thought everybody else was
Okay,
Michelin
no one
star
had
chef.
You never went
skills.
to PS school
Most
in
of the
Beloit.
people were men. The men call in their wives. It's like so embarrassing.
dear.
We're making béarnaise sauce, which is anyone who is a chef. It's one of the most difficult
Yeah,
sauces
there's all
to
that
make.
egg yolk and shit going.
I turned to I had a marketing person with me in the house while I was cooking. I turned to her and I was like, I've literally seen better looking vomit.
Oh, it's split.
My
It's
my
split?
béarnaise sucked. And I was like, fuck it. And I was like, just start drinking. I'm like, we're not serving this to anyone. We're not going to actually eat it. We'll order, takeaway later.
It's all right.
It's basically like a
Cheers.
mayonnaise,
Cheers.
and if it splits, it's horrible.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was awful.
Yeah, and anyway, but
and-
the reason it, from my point of view, it wasn't a disaster, and I imagine for you as the client, and you had a certain idea of the choreography and how it would play out. I can see why you'd think that. It was just novel and memorable, and everyone's kitchen like a fucking bomb would hit it because this bloke had us doing sauces
I mean,
and
we're
sautéing
whisking
stuff.
shit. We're
Yeah.
like, we're making clarified butter.
And
I'm
also,
like,
we hadn't necessarily been told that all this gear would be necessary. So everyone's having to leg it off. And you go, right, now just get a bowl and then separate this from that and do all this. And then, so people were doing this and there was no pausing. The bloke just didn't go, all right, I'll leave you to just work that out for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
He was
it's
like,
like-
right, and now do this.
Oh, it was
And
such a
I was
disaster.
lobbing stuff in the sink. There was like breadcrumbs
he
flying
assumed
around.
the level of skills that was.
Oh yeah, there was
No,
one
it
bit.
was-
He got us to do these little breadcrumb balls, and they're incredibly fit. You had to sort of, I think that was the béarnaise. Yeah, it was the béarnaise. The béarnaise. You then put breadcrumbs in, and then you roll them into balls, and then fried them. And you can imagine
I mean, it was
they're
a
all breaking into bits in the frying pan.
It was a disaster. At one point, the chef, we finally make the main course, which is some sort of like meat or fish, and he has on Zoom. He puts he cooks it, shows us like this is what it looks like. We're like, okay, whatever. He puts it down. His dog comes up and eats the meat.
No way.
Excellent. Oh yeah, there are about
Like,
2 or 3
this
types
is a
of meat that we have to deal with as well.
This is such a disaster.
No.
Oh my God.
And then this whole thing. Presumably, Danielle hoped the cooking bit would last an hour max.
Oh my God,
It took about 2+ hours.
so bad.
And Danielle finally got to do her bit of.
I was like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm like, drink wine. Fuck.
Katie, who I'm good mates with.
Well,
at
so
Bagel,
afterwards-
was looking quite frazzled.
Afterwards, we're like, okay, next time we're just going to do like a wine tasting, and so now I do cocktail making parties. Much simpler,
Well, now you've learned,
much
isn't it?
better.
Yeah,
You eat whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah, and
just-
it's great.
Just
And
teach someone how to.
I have
make
a virtual
really good
cocktail
old-fashioned
party
or
coming
something
up on
like
October 13th.
that. Is it?
Yeah, I'm going to host it. It's an F1 themed. F1 uses the public cloud in the pit.
Okay.
Do race, in the race decisions. Using the analytics of the public cloud. Go public cloud. And so we're doing, Austin has an F1 track, the Circuit of the Americas. And the race is the following week. We actually have 2 races, I think, this year because Singapore relocated it to Austin because of COVID. So 2 F1. So I'm going to be at the track. There won't be any races there. And I'll have the turn 1. COTA is famous for the most left turns in any of the F1 tracks.
Really?
And so turn 1 goes up into a hill and it's like a hairpin.
Like a
left.
banked.
So you'll be
I
able
think
to
it's
see it.
probably because they were like, well, in America, it's like NASCAR, so we have to turn left.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. But so we're going to do an F1 themed
Wow,
cocktail
cool.
party. It'll be fun.
Well, you certainly seem to have an imaginative approach to PR, which is good. And I got to say, by the way, this
Electric jellyfish.
This electric jellyfish, which is 6.5%, it doesn't taste like 6.5%, does it?
Delicious.
Which is even more
Very
dangerous.
nice.
Do you want your?
No, I'm still working.
And it's a hazy IPA.
Pierre's
which is
normally
good,
got
as
to
we're
get
talking
back
about
and
the cloud.
So
babysit.
yeah,
He doesn't
I mean,
want to get too mashed.
multiple people rave about this beer,
It's
and
very
it
good.
comes from
It's
a
good.
pizza place.
I know.
They have these
Later.
big, craft.
I want to go
use
to
the same
Austin even
yeast.
more now.
Yeah, that's great. But where were we? We were talking,
yeah, it was a bit of a tangent.
You were talking about Parlor and how
Okay, yeah.
dangerous it is.
So let me summarize. I mean, I know you know it already, but for the sake of this pod, let me summarize the pushback. It's the consolidation of power. It's the false economy of big companies thinking we can save a few quid by outsourcing all our cloud, all our server stuff to someone else. It's it's just the pushback on big tech, which I'm sure you're aware. There's quite a lot happening in the sort of legislative, political sort of area.
Yeah.
They've got to the point where we've got the big, whichever acronym you use. But I think, I think you call them the hyperscalers. Let's say Amazon and Google are probably the definitive ones. Apple's huge, but more from a devices and a consumer point of view. Facebook's huge, but from a specifically sort of social media point of view. And there's 1 or 2 others that come up. But I'd say Amazon and Google are probably the daddies as far as having incredible reach in everyone's life, whether it's business life or consumer life. I use Gmail. I use Google everything. I've even got a
Android.
Pixel.
yeah, but it's not just an Android; it's a Pixel.
Yeah.
It's a
But the
Google
other
phone.
one with the cloud specifically as well is the sort of security side of it, which I think we've talked about before on the pod. I mean, there's been quite a bit of coverage recently of things like, when Fastly had that outage and it brought down lots of different sites. I mean, if you have if you have a problem on Totogi, for instance, if it's one charger
Yeah.
for lots of customers, do you then have this sort of ripple effect where it could affect? Whereas if it's just a sort of an on-premise solution, there was a security problem, then you'd be less.
So I guess we could
exposed.
summarise the
It's-
objection, which I'll then pass on to you to sort
Yeah.
of to field.
Yeah.
Is it's the all your eggs in one basket objection? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, the public cloud, your Parler point about their ability to censor you or kick you off, right? I mean, that is, it is a possibility. It's not zero, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think your point about, are they going to kick off a big brand like Vodafone? Maybe unlikely. And I think,
But they could.
And the thing is that I think executive teams at telcos moving to the public cloud is a multi-year endeavor. It's a significant endeavor to move your workloads, move them right, optimize the pricing, understand the pricing, hire the teams. I mean, this is going to take a long time. And so you can't just move there in a dime. And so you can sit and wait and see how these things I know Iain, you brought up it, if it was regulated, I feel a little bit better, or if they put in whatever it is.
Yeah, same we go for social media as far as I'm concerned, which is like almost like a consumer side of a similar coin.
Mm-hmm. And so you could wait for those things to happen, but I think an executive team has to weigh, well, what is my next competitor going to do? And if they don't have those concerns and they start their 5-year journey in, right, and they start, they don't get kicked off, things get better, things get cheaper, they get faster, and they have the ability to put out business ideas faster than you and start stealing your subscribers or stealing your enterprise customers while you're waiting for these things to be sorted, right? Those are the things you got to weigh. And I did an MWC keynote this year on the paradox of the public cloud. I do think there's two sides to it. It's not 100% no-brainer, good, you should do it. I think there are some downsides, right? There's some risk. There's some, like Fastly, there's some issues where something goes down, you are potentially exposed. But I think the upsides outweigh the downsides.
So it's a risk-reward argument.
It is.
In
and
summary.
I think, executives,
But that's honest of you.
Yeah.
I mean, because, it's one thing, from an English point of view, describing yourself as an evangelist is not a positive, because we're stuffy old.
Do you have a better word for me?
No, I mean not necessarily. I mean you sort of parodied cheerleader.
Yeah.
But both evangelist and cheerleader. I mean, obviously they seem, especially cheerleaders. By definition, American.
Blindly devoted to that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's easy to assume that someone, and I didn't necessarily ever assume that of you, by the way.
Yeah.
And actually, if someone's got their agenda on the table, that makes things simpler.
Yeah.
Then you start from the position that we've had in this conversation. You got your agenda, we got ours. Let's see where they meet in the middle, if at all.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily have a better word than evangelist. I suppose enthusiast, supporter, investor, which is going to lead me on to another question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing. When I hear, as with my English ears, and I'm sure American ears are different, when I hear evangelist, I'm thinking, is this person just going to be a single issue banging on about it?
No, I mean,
not listening to any counter arguments.
I think, it's different by country. The consideration of the public cloud is there a hyperscaler in country? If not, is there one that's friendly? Are you able to do it? And it is literally different country by country. A conversation with Russia is going to go very differently than a conversation with Canada. Right. And so, I have my team researching, like, what are the rules for, when I go talk to someone, what's the rule for Bolivia? I don't know what it is. There's not a hyperscaler there. There's not one coming anytime soon. What should a Bolivian telco do about the public cloud? And so I think, I think each leadership team has to consider it. They got to consider the market and what their competitors are doing. And if no one's doing anything, and would it be better if the public cloud wasn't around? Maybe. But it is here and you got to deal with it.
But the telco issue, we talked about this a bit earlier, but just coming back to this sort of lock-in issue, which does seem to be quite I talked to Orange this week. I think you read the article, actually, and they interestingly raised this point about we've been talking about Ericsson and Huawei for ages, and we need to be careful with the public cloud that we don't have another sort of form of lock-in. Is there? Because I know you don't like that expression cloud agnostic you've sort of objected to in the past, which sounds like it's one of those terms that gets thrown out to suggest that you could sort of move things around quite easily. But is there something that can be done to sort of address that concern? If there was a point, let's say in the future, where someone had gone all in on AWS, well, someone has, Dish kind of has, and then they went, well, actually, we want to go to Microsoft Azure, that it could be done without it becoming a sort of multi-year, massive investment project.
I think it's easier to move to a different cloud than it is to move from on-premise to a public cloud.
Right.
And when you do that first move from on-premise to the public cloud, the softwareification, I think that was the word you used, like moving everything into software. It's easier to move things around when it's software than versus hardware, right?
Presumably depending on how much of the proprietary stuff from the cloud
you're using.
You have at the
right.
And I took your point earlier. I thought that was a really good one. If you're really worried about it, if you're at a Scott level of paranoid about it, then use non-proprietary sort of.
You can do that, but there was a really good blog.
But then, sorry to butt in, but then your point also seemed to be that if you do that, you lose some of the
benefits.
But isn't that
grooviness.
one of the things about Totogi though, that you're based on AWS, and to sort of use that, you'd have to be on AWS, as I understand.
No,
You
I
don't
mean,
have to
what
be on
we're
AWS.
providing is a managed platform. So it's a
Okay.
little bit like Salesforce. Like, do you know where Salesforce runs?
Right.
No. Do you care?
point.
Doesn't really matter. And so we've made that decision, right? And it's going to be hard for telcos because they're so used to dictating. Like, literally, they tell vendors, well, we use Oracle databases,
Yep.
so your product has to support it. And then the next guy's like, well, we're a Microsoft shop. We do SQL Server, forcing vendors to now support 2 different databases for the same product. I mean, and because that's what you guys picked.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world in software has moved like, nope, we manage the whole stack. You're not going to pick these different technical components within it. If you want to use our product and our service, like Salesforce, you don't know what database they're running on. You don't care. You just care that it works.
But could a telco be all in with Microsoft Azure and be able to make use of Totogi? They could
Correct.
do that.
Yeah.
They can. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it doesn't matter where you're. I mean, you're going to have integrations to other systems, and
Yep.
they may be on premise, they may be in another public cloud, and we can work with those
Okay.
things. I mean, we're just trying to expose the layer that matters, which is what are your tariff plans? That's the differentiation, right? I mean, I think another thing you guys talk about is if you give up all the stuff, are you giving up your ability to differentiate yourself as a telco? And I like to argue the differentiation isn't managing the Dell servers. The differentiation is in
Yeah.
the topmost layer, which is what are your tariffs and what's your value proposition to subscribers?
Yeah, although I'd say, I mean, I'm looking at this over maybe 20 years,
Yeah.
which is the transition that you think might happen. I mean, there's a lot of concern, it has been for ages now, about the internet companies as, you know, this is broader than public cloud. It's some of the stuff that Scott was just talking about, them being real sort of challengers on the services side to telcos. And, you know, we see the impact they've had in retail or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. I mean, do we get to a point where, I mean, Microsoft in particular seems to be very, very interested in being a big kind of communications force. It has a
Yeah.
massive portfolio of offerings now.
Yeah.
Does it get to a stage where all these networks are really just sort of utility firms run by a small number of public clouds in the next 20 years?
I mean,
And
I don't think there'll be.
it's quite a philosophical sort of
Yeah, I mean, I don't-
thought, but
I think, running a network, right? I don't think the public cloud vendors want that business,
Yeah.
right? They're going to leave it to the telcos, right? And so no one wants that business, right? It's a hard business to run. So I don't think that's the threat. And I think number 2, these guys are software people at their heart, selling to a very, they want to sell to everyone, all the enterprises. I don't think they're going after. That's not like an easy adjacency for them of like managing.
So you don't think the hyperscalers, the public cloud companies would get into, for example, BSS, OSS?
I mean, I don't know that they have industry-specific offerings in
Right.
other industries. Like, let's take fintech.
But that
which
doesn't
is
seem
super-
like an unlikely evolution. So one of the things that fuels my, for want of a better word, paranoia,
Yeah.
is I know compared to my contemporaries, my mates,
Yeah.
I see something happen and I'm always extrapolating it.
Yeah.
I'm going, okay, what's the fucking precedent that's been set here?
Yeah.
What's going to happen 5 years down the line as a result of this? Like a lot of the stuff that's been going on during the whole COVID thing, a lot of the restrictions of civil liberties. Some people are like, all right, Scott, calm down. We're just trying to get over a pandemic. And I'm like, yeah, but now we've set the precedent that the state can insist on this, not insist on that, can
Yeah.
mandate this, mandate that. And that's fine. Not everyone's like me. And I'm not even saying I'm right. I'm just admitting my biases and all
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But I think that's where a lot of this stuff comes from for me. I think, okay, this is fine now. But what about 5 years down the line? If I use social media, if Facebook can stop me posting loony conspiracy theories about
the public
COVID
cloud.
now, about public cloud. No, it hasn't started censoring people on that yet. But it can stop me saying that, it's all conspiracy by the CIA or whatever
Actually,
bullshit someone might make up.
YouTube just announced they're going to delete.
I know, I wrote
all
about that today.
anti-vax
I wrote about that
videos.
today.
really?
So yeah, if YouTube, well, that's a good one. I just wrote about it today. If YouTube can say that we're restricting all content that is skeptical about the mainstream medical consensus on COVID.
No, this one is about anti-vaxxing videos.
Yeah, well, that's
what you said.
No, you're broader than what this.
yeah. Well, because I think it is that broad. Anti-vaxxing sounds like you're just dealing with nutters. I think they're going to censor people who just express skepticism.
That's too much of that electric jellyfish.
Too much
that
of
you've
that.
had.
It is. I'm so sorry. But also, tell me how much you love the public cloud.
Anyway, but that's the point. I'll extrapolate that. You can get done. Let's even if we frame it your way, you can get done for being an anti-vaxxer today, but can you get done for being an anti-something else tomorrow? But anyway, I'm not saying I'm necessarily right, and maybe I'm too twitchy in that way. Maybe I should take it down a notch. But that's what I apply to my biggest concerns about the public cloud is like, okay.
I mean, you can leave at any time, right? Like, what's so great about the public cloud, unlike some of the vendors that we have in telco, where you sign multi-year deals, right? And it's really hard to get out of these contracts. I mean, I think Oracle very famously, it's very difficult, right? They come and audit you. They find how you're not using their license, right? Oh, here's this hefty fee. We're going to choose.
Comcast.
So
they're quite popular with the government customers, aren't they?
Right.
Oracle?
I mean,
So
Oracle's famous for
The
this.
SLA is set up such that it's punitive to leave, which
Well,
seems
they have
to
the
be what
right
you're
to.
describing.
Well, they have the right to audit you when they always find something wrong.
Right.
They come in with a
Why
hefty.
do they have the right to audit? That's a bit
it's
cheeky.
in
isn't it?
it's in
If
their
I wanted
contract.
to stop using, like, I'm with EE for my
Well,
phone,
it's a
EE
trade-
couldn't come fucking audit me if I wanted to go to Vodafone. That'd be ridiculous.
Well, no. I mean, you install their database on premise, right? They give you install disks or a download. You use the license key in other places.
Yeah.
They love that database to kind of proliferate through the organization. They're like, Microsoft does it too, right? They come and they say you have X number of licenses for Windows or Office or whatever, and when you're out of compliance, they hit you with the bill. It is their right. I mean, you are stealing their license, so they come in and they want to true
because
you
you're
up.
using it wrong.
You've installed it in too many places and you haven't
I
paid.
see. Oh, so people being cheeky when you've paid for 100 licenses and you
use
110.
150 or 110, right?
Oh, I see. So that's why they have to have the audit capacity.
So
That
they
makes
do,
sense.
and so they come in and like we found it on these places, and you're like, holy shit, that's a big number, and they're like, we'll sign it, hey, whatever.
Maybe we can work something out.
We can work something out, right? Why don't you use our Oracle cloud, right? And then they're announcing an
I
Oracle
have to get
cloud.
my Marlon Brando voice out.
Fake clouds.
Fake cloud.
What do you think of? I mean, just looking at the Chinese, because we were just saying that we're probably not going to be able to use those clouds here anyway. But Huawei's quite keen on being a big. Well, it says it is a big cloud player now
Yeah.
in
That's its
China.
pivot.
That's its big pivot. And
Well,
I
I
remember
think-
talking to James about this,
Yeah.
James Crawshaw. And he was really sceptical that they'd have any chance at all of taking on Alibaba. For the same reason he said, well, what would you think if Ericsson said we're going to be a public cloud player?
Yeah.
Well, the Yanks aren't going to allow it. Sorry, excuse my use of that.
No,
word. I don't mean it in a
but
pejorative way.
I'm not talking about them doing it in America or the West. I'm talking about them
Just
doing it in
just in
China
general.
and
Yeah.
in Asian countries that
Oh,
are
I see.
friendly to
Yeah.
Huawei. Do you think it has an opportunity there to
Well, on the
compete,
grand
or-
scale of clouds, right? I think the reason when I talk about the hyperscalers, I talk about three guys, right?
Yeah.
Amazon, Microsoft, and Google,
Yeah.
right? Even Alibaba is, even though it's been around for a while, is significantly behind. And it's behind in that they're more infrastructure providers versus the software component, right?
Right.
The databases, the services,
Yep.
the AI, the analytics, the machine. AWS has 160 services that you can buy. And it's growing every day. Every time, right? It's just they're just announcing. So Alibaba's behind that, as is Oracle, and IBM's behind that, and now Huawei's coming up. They're behind all those guys,
Yeah.
right? So your chances of catching up, unless you're all in like AWS and like just building it like crazy, I think it's low.
Well, that's where you've really got to give respect to Jeff Bezos and that lad who's taken over now. That Jeff Bezos is fucking flying into space the whole time.
Andy
Jassy.
Jassy.
Jassy, yeah.
That's
You
in
know,
the mind.
He
I'm
used to
from.
be head of AWS, didn't
No,
he?
I know.
Yes, he was.
No,
Yeah.
that's why I'm giving him props.
Well,
his,
his,
they're
his
ahead
Blue
of the curve.
Origin is from. I was born in El Paso, Texas,
Right.
and Blue Origin is like a couple hours away.
Right.
So he flies into and stays in El Paso.
So yeah, I mean, total respect to all these people. While I. What are you doing? What are you
Totally.
singing?
He's singing Marty Robbins' song.
I think you should pull the microphone in and use that as your
We should have a little
promo.
fight.
for-
We should have a little 1 minute.
No, how does it go? It's about
Pierre
I met a girl
Corona.
from El Paso.
Do it.
Out in West Texas, in a
Out in the West Texas town of El Paso,
met a girl-
I
I'm
fell in love with a Mexican girl. I am Mexican.
I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
That's your roots, Mexican, yeah.
I am Mexican. With a name like Royston, it's hard to tell. My husband is not Mexican.
What was your maiden name?
Rios.
Okay, that's very Mexican.
Yeah, it is.
Means
yeah.
rivers.
It means, yeah, exactly.
Danielle Rivers.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
But you were talking about Jeff Bezos. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. So the only point I want to make, while I'll push back and I'll get twitchy about the size of these people, they're there on merit. I mean, Jeff Bezos, Andy Jassy, is that his name? Jassy. And the Google people and the Microsoft people and all these people. Microsoft's a story by itself. I've been covering them since they were still mainly a box software company. And so their pivot is pretty substantial. And they've done it once they got rid of nutters like Steve Ballmer and got this guy, Nadella, in.
Yeah.
They've done a great job of it. So Bill Gates can go off and keep saving the world, bless him.
Yeah.
They spent $100 billion last year in CapEx.
Really?
Right? Every time they build a region, it's like Amazon, it's about $3 billion of investment.
Exactly. So they deserve it. And they
insane.
deserve it from a consumer point of view. I mean, I probably spend more money as a consumer on Amazon. Probably the only company I spend more money with than Amazon is fucking Sainsbury's.
But
and that's because that's where my dinner comes from.
That's what scares me in a way. It's that they're so... People used to get scared of oil companies, didn't they, and energy companies a few years ago, more than a few years ago. And now you look at the ones that have got $2 trillion market capitalizations. I mean, there's a few of them there, aren't there? Apple.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, Microsoft.
Above the $1 trillion, yeah.
And then you look at the resources they've got and how much they can spend on R&D or whatever it might be.
But
and how much they can distort the market if they
nobody
want
else can really come along and do anything to compete.
Yeah.
It's just too hard
Well,
for anybody.
I am fighting for Telco to not be a dumb pipe. And I'm fighting for Telco to fight off the OTT vendors and the siphoning of R2. ARPU, sorry. My beer's talking now. R2D2.
Star Wars.
Of ARPU. I believe that we can fight back and we can win.
Well, I think that's a good message.
Yeah, but
I completely
think,
agree with you on that.
Yeah, but you got to start doing things differently and
that's
and
a really
go
good
over
point.
the top on their investment.
But I suppose this is not what we've talked about that much on this discussion. Is if you do take the positive line of the public cloud and then what it allows operators to do. We've just been talking about costs, but you do think it would sort of free them up to
Well,
actually
that was your
try
message
and,
at the start when you're talking about your company. Is that agility to bill in a bespoke way?
I mean,
to offer
talk about people who have more data about us, right? You're worried about all the data they have on us as they right, the big tech companies. Telcos have a lot of data about you.
Yeah.
You carry your phone with you everywhere you go, including the bathroom. Right? I mean, they know what you're looking at. They know where you're driving. And that data is powerful, and we don't use it as Telco.
And they've got a unique billing relationship as well.
Right. I mean,
So you look
why
at
doesn't
mobile
Telco...
money in Africa transcends the whole banking system, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Telco, has to validate your identity to give you a SIM. You can present a Telco bill to get a mortgage or buy a car. Right, it's a trusted thing. Why doesn't Telco own digital identity? Why does Apple have a wallet installed on the phone? Why isn't the Telco wallet? And so there is opportunity there, and go get it. But you gotta give some stuff up. You gotta stop focusing on the plumbing, and to get to these other things, you gotta take the risk on the cloud and use those tools because they're the best tools out there. And so that's what I'm fighting for. I'm like, let's go win again. And maybe that's my cheerleader nature coming out.
No, and I think if that's right, Ian, I think that's a good point to summarise it on. I think you've stated your case very well, and I don't have a strong pushback on that particular case. The reservations about big tech being the matrix and all that will always be there, but I think you've made the great point of one, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
And two, I suppose it's managing it. It's having service level agreements. It's having regulations. Having something such that power is capped.
Yeah.
And such that the people who choose to go all in on the public cloud have some protection if that public cloud provider turns capricious, as they did with AWS and Parler.
Yeah.
That'll be it. I want to squeeze in a couple of other topics in the brief time we have. Are you all right?
It is
You
very
haven't got to
brief.
shoot off.
I'm
it's
cool.
very brief time. It's going to be like 5 or so minutes per topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are we saying, Pierre? How much time we got?
Yeah.
It really is 5
7
minutes.
minutes per.
7 minutes per topic. Okay, we can really let our hair down. Because we always have 3 topics, and I think we should have 3 this time as well.
Okay.
Squeeze in 3.
So,
Let's do it.
but I tell you what we'll do. We'll have a strict thing. I'll present it. I'll pass it to Ian then to Danielle, and then maybe conclude and move on to the next thing. So we won't have a to and fro.
Okay.
Be more like debating society or something.
great.
Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is, I suppose, geopolitics. So that's a nice, easy, concise subject that we can just cover in 5
Nice
minutes.
and small.
5 minutes. Great.
The world. Specifically, I mean, we just touched on it. I think it was breaking when we did the pod last week. But there's been this ongoing case with Huawei CFO and daughter of the founder called Meng
Wanzhou.
I can't remember her surname. It won't stick in my head.
It's actually pronounced Meng Wanzhou, I think.
Meng Wanzhou. Okay.
Although
I said Ming.
she also has Sabrina as a first name that she uses sometimes.
Yeah, but not often. Anyway,
Depends what mood she's in.
she's in a Sabrina.
Call me
kind of
Sabrina.
mood. We've all been in a Sabrina kind of mood from time to time. And she'd been held under house arrest in Vancouver, in Canada, because America wanted to extradite her over this very involved, very complicated case about whether or not Huawei had tried to deceive America so that it could do business with Iran, which was...
Well, it's about deceiving HSBC Bank specifically.
Okay. And cut a long story short, after 2 years, they sort of cut a deal. But the way I characterised it was America kind of threw in the towel. Now, there was this big long... They got her to do some confession going, yes, I've been a naughty exec and I shouldn't have done it and I'll never do it again. But basically, everything America was trying to get initially, they didn't get. I.e., she got to fuck off back to Canada. There were no charges. She's on some kind of weird international law parole, whereby if she does a similar thing again, which obviously she's not going to do, then they get to have a go at her again. But she's not going to make a mistake.
Well, that's ridiculous because she's in China, so they're not going to extradite her, are they?
She's probably just not going to make a mistake of travelling through anywhere that, like Canada again.
Yeah. I think that was a face-saving thing.
Yes, I thought it was face-saving. But the thing is, while I happily characterise it as an American defeat, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think I might have said humiliation, but that could be me being a bit hyperbolic in my write-up. It might have been a minor humiliation, but on the whole, I think it was for the best. Firstly, I don't think the case against her was that great. Secondly, and more importantly, I think it feels like a bit of a high watermark for all the aggro that's been going on between the US and China, where they've sort of had presumably there's been some political chat behind the scenes. They've had a little word. They've gone, all right, I tell you what, we'll knock it on the head. She can come back. Lo and behold, these two Canadians who were held in captivity in China and weren't even charged for 18 months suddenly got let free. So there's clearly some horse trading going on there. Or Ada Two Michaels.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But, and that's fine. It's all quite cynical. It's not the letter of the law. But maybe this marks a point where we realise, and maybe this is a post-Trump thing, and I'm not as down on Trump as a lot of people are, but he's a bit of a nutter. Maybe this is a post-Trump thing where things have got a bit more rational, a bit more sober, he says, drinking his 6.5% beer. And
clearly.
and normal business has resumed, and people are just having a chat. And I'm hoping that marks a de-escalation. What do you think?
I don't think it marks a de-escalation.
Okay.
I don't think you're sending nuclear submarines to Australia when there's a de-escalation in geopolitics. I just think that
nuclear powered.
Yeah. Let's look at that at what it is. I don't see any other sense that Biden is relaxing his anti-China thing. I think this is very much a one-off. I think the whole Meng case had become a bit of a sideshow in the dispute with Huawei. I mean, when it started off, it was almost an attempt, I think, to impose the kind of sanctions that they'd introduced against ZTE, which was also put on the entity list, if you remember.
And they were
doing things
pretty
in
well,
Iran.
didn't they?
Yep.
But all that has happened in parallel to the Meng case. I mean, they've done everything they possibly can to cripple Huawei now on the telecom front.
No
There's not
doubt about
anything
that.
they can do. If they tried finding it wouldn't pay. So I don't see that any of that's going to change. I just think that her situation the case wasn't good. It was a flimsy case.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what they did, but let's be honest, transparent companies don't set up front companies that sell equipment to countries like Iran.
So there's a bit of dodginess going on.
It's clear that it doesn't, from either perspective, it doesn't look good because you've always got that in mind. But at the same time, I went through all the HSBC documents that were released because they got sent to me and clearly staff did know about the relationship.
Right.
So, and
Was there a smoking gun?
I mean, those documents. I mean, this is going to. We don't want to get involved in this because it's going to go on for like too long.
Right. Okay, fair
but
enough.
it was very.
I'll stop digging.
It was very ambiguous, let's put it like that. I mean, there were clearly emails that showed that staff within HSBC knew that Huawei had a relationship with Skycom, and it's just a case of really how high up the ladder it went. But I just think it was getting to the stage where
forever.
I just think it was getting to the stage where it was almost a bad thing for relations between Canada and the US, because it was going to the Canadian justice system was probably saying, well, there's probably not enough here to extradite her, and then what's the US going to do? It's going to try and lean on it, and I just think the whole thing had become a bit of a sideshow, actually. In the whole, I don't think it will change the direction of travel with China at all. I don't see any easing off from Biden on that front at all.
So
yeah, I mean, but just one thing, and we can wrap it up, is I think it was a tactic Trump employed often, which is making perception feel like reality.
Yeah.
Right? And so...
kayfabe, all that stuff.
Yeah. And so, arrest, lean on Canada, our friendly neighbor, get this favor done.
Generate bargaining chips.
Right, generate that, but then they're evil. It starts that whole train going. No one knows if it's right or not. It takes time to sort out. No one's going to read all the documents.
Yeah,
except Iain, because he's got no life.
Right. Right? I mean, telco execs, it creates this little perception, right? And it starts the train moving on, Huawei. Look, they are evil. Look at this. And it starts it.
Yeah,
and it's worked.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think totally PR and exactly.
As a tactic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Completely.
Well, I think Daniel's characterization of Trump's MO
But now the Huawei's, I mean, I wouldn't say it's finished, but it's in real trouble.
It's left the station a little bit.
The call they had last week with what they were saying is going to happen to the smartphone business was much, much worse than I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I
didn't know
about that. 30
Did we talk about that?
I wrote about it on Friday, or Monday, but they said 50 billion they made last year in smartphone revenues, and Eric Xu said it's going to go down by 30 to 40 billion this year.
Right.
Wow.
That's the decline.
So 80 to 90%.
Yep.
Ouch. Go on.
So no, a PR tactic, right? It's a tactic you can use to fight competitors, right?
Yeah.
And so public perception or what people think, and versus the facts, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
And
So that was Trump's MO, and I just wrote a thing today. There's been some new deal done between the US and the EU that just got announced, and I think one of the biggest negatives of the Trump reign was relations between US and its allies. He was actually quite good at setting up chats in the Middle East, hanging out with that nutter in North Korea and all that sort of thing. Maybe because he recognises a fellow nutter. They just sit there going, bah!
Right.
But he wasn't so good. He wasn't so good at hanging out with Europe and Latin America and his allies. Anyway, my feeling is that there's a high watermark in terms of us facing down China. Xi Jinping's obviously got some ideas, and sadly, and I regret this, but you look throughout history. Most of the misery that has happened throughout history, most of the wars, has been blokes with big egos deciding to go and beat their fucking chest on the global scale. And the only language they understand is other blokes with big egos, or collectives, but people who stand up to them, whether it's an individual or collectives. And what seems to be going better, Trump tried his bit. He tried his single bloke with a big ego thing. Biden, for all his many concerns about him, seems to be going for the more collegiate, let's just get a bunch of allies together, let's hang out with Europe, let's hang out with the UK, let's hang out with Australia, let's all get together and put pressure, a more sort of smothering, blanketing pressure on China to fucking wind its neck in a little bit. Yeah. And I think that's probably better.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing is hyperscales, as we define them, or just super big US big tech internet companies getting into consumer devices. I don't know if we spoke about it last week. We might have touched on it. But Facebook did this big thing on the metaverse. And the metaverse is basically how Facebook envisions. It's not just a Facebook term, but Facebook seems to be the biggest evangelist.
Is it a DC Comics term as well?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Isn't it?
Might actually be a hero.
People like Wonder Woman.
Some Thanos type of motherfucker. Anyway, metaverse is like taking VR, virtual reality, and augmented reality, and another term, extended reality, XR, into a sort of more coherent, more all-encompassing, matrixy type of thing. You know the basic plot of the Matrix, where you're actually not, you're in a virtual world the whole time. You just don't even know you are until you're red
You
pilled.
live in that.
Yeah.
Until
You
you're
live in that
red-pilled.
world.
Exactly.
That's the
Stick with
metaverse.
the- stick with the
Right? You
pill.
can design your avatar. Like it's like the Matrix.
Yeah.
Right? I look like Trinity, which P.S. would be my avatar because she's a badass.
Yeah.
Right? She walks
I
around
might
in
do that
leather
as
all
well.
the
We might have
time.
to fight over Trinity. No, I think I'll be Lawrence Fishburne. He looks pretty badass.
He's cool.
When's the new one out?
The new one's out.
Again,
Yeah,
my
the new one's out
tangent.
soon.
Christmas.
And they've still got Keanu Reeves, who still, to be fair to him, does look good. Even
He's
though
awesome.
Yeah, he
even though
does
he's
look
getting-
good.
Age.
Even though he's getting on a bit.
John Wick. I like him as John Wick too.
Yeah.
He's got a funny beard and long hair.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's his sort of Bill and Ted
That's
thing.
his
Like,
John
dude.
Wick character.
Yeah.
pretty much,
I'd just like to see a whole film where Keanu Reeves just went, dude.
There's a YouTube
That's the
video.
only line he had.
You should put it in your show notes. There is a YouTube video with him saying "dude" a bajillion different ways.
Yeah, yeah.
Dude.
Well, that's it.
Like with different intonations.
No one-
like
no one says-
"dude" with a question mark.
Yeah.
Dude.
It's like
Yeah, no
Owen
one says
Wilson.
dude like
Dude.
Keanu Reeves.
Wow.
So Facebook was last week banging on a metaverse, and then launching all this product. So they obviously bought a company called Oculus a little while ago, and they're really into these VR headsets. And they sort of put up a blog. It was Nick Clegg again, bless him, keeps rolling the dice. He can't help himself. About how we're going to play nice and we're going to be good, and everyone, basically, even the US tech press that I think often can be a bit too sycophantic to big tech, was just like, yeah, right. They weren't having it at all. And then this week we've had Amazon launch this robot called Astro.
Yeah, it looks rubbish.
Yeah, which is like a
have
little,
to say.
which is basically like a little tablet on wheels that follows you around the house trying to be helpful.
It looks like
I'd be like,
something
I'll
that
tell you how
Clive
you can be
Sinclair
helpful,
would
you
have
can
come up
fuck
with in
off.
the 80s.
You what?
It looks like something that Clive Sinclair would have come up with in the 1980s.
It's a bit clunky, and it still costs $1,000 in dollars.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, and so as in the interest of time, that's my introduction. To you first, Ian. What do you feel about sort of big tech getting more and more involved in sort of consumer tech, consumer hardware, our daily lives, that sort of thing?
I mean, they already are, aren't they? It's...
Well, more. It's relative, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this brings it back to the public cloud issue, I suppose, which is why
It does a bit. It's a bit of full circle.
Totally.
It's I think it's a concern if you have companies that straddle numerous sectors and that have a powerful position in all of them, because then you potentially have monopolies across numerous sectors of the economy, and it's just a huge distortion of control, I think, and power. And that will be, I mean, that to me, the clearest example of that at the moment, I would say, is a company like Amazon, which has a huge presence in everybody's lives, I think, from the moment they wake up to the moment you go to bed, and is a huge force on the organisational side and the government side as well with AWS. And I don't deny that it's brilliant at what it does. It really is. And I'm a customer of
And
Amazon
it's
Prime.
probably
I
got
use
what-
it all the time.
And it's got where it has on merit.
And
That's
so
the thing.
it's almost hypocritical to be saying it, because I think its products are absolutely amazing. But the flip side of the coin for me is just that, who comes along and does something about that? Who can possibly challenge a company in that position in the future? It's almost like that film, Aliens, when they're sitting in the boardroom at the start of the film, when Ripley's been brought back from sort of deep sleep, and it's the company, isn't it?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
company wants you to do this. It always makes me think of
Wayland
Yeah.
Industries.
in a kind of in a sinister way of
Yeah, and
that's Prometheus, isn't it?
No, but I think it's the same
the same company. Yeah.
Well, it's a recurring thing in other science fictions
It
like
is.
RoboCop or Starship Troopers.
Or
You've
CP.
always got this man.
This one private sector player that
I mean, it's in
that's
WALL-E,
dominant.
right? It's
in
big,
WALL-E, yes.
big
That's
and
true.
big and large, small and large.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
forget the
yeah.
name of the corporation.
WALL-E's a great film for a kids'
It's-
film.
oh,
That's
it's beautiful.
amazing. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
beautiful.
Good as well. So,
Yeah.
final word to you, Danielle, on the big tech sort of getting more involved in more the
Yeah.
consumer side.
Well, again, bringing back to what I said, I'm fighting for Telco to win. And then, I think people are always wondering what the big 5G killer use case is going to monetize the network. That's our big problem. How are we going to monetize the biggest CapEx? 90% of the CapEx is spent on the network. And the metaverse is a huge opportunity for Telco to do that.
Yeah.
Right? For the metaverse to work, right? Ignoring all the paranoia of them monitoring and the Astro, the dog, following you everywhere. Let's just assume you can get over that for 2 seconds.
I'll try.
Right? The network is a super important key thing to making that whole thing work, right? You need bandwidth. You need super low latency, right? For it to be real.
Yeah, certainly
Right?
for
You need
streaming VR.
You need
Doesn't work without
resiliency.
that.
This is the fucking 3 things we all talk about all the time. And so telco should be like,
Right
fuck
in
yeah, metaverse. I'm going to build tools like crazy for this to go, right?
Okay, so how good a job are they doing?
Do you hear about them talking about the metaverse?
Not much.
Not at all. And I'm like, let's start with work tools. We just went through lockdown on Zoom. It was the best tool out there. Surely we can make that better.
It's not the ultimate, is it?
It's not great Zoom.
It's
I don't
not.
think.
It's.
No.
I mean, it works.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
and
And
works.
our
it's in the
bar
right
is
place at the right
so
time, yeah.
low.
Yeah.
I have like a great feature I want to add to Zoom, maybe for.
It worked when we did our cooking thing.
But yes, I mean, right? Like, how much better could that have been? The pandemic, we would not have felt as lonely.
What is that feature?
My great idea for Zoom, which is on May the 4th, which is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you, right? It's like, May the 4th be
Oh,
with
you
you.
definitely get on with Mary. She's mad about Star Wars.
I love Star Wars.
Oh,
I
yeah.
dressed up as Princess Leia as a kid, and when The Phantom Menace came out, I was like, I went to the
You
thing,
did the full Monty.
full on buns,
Excellent.
not the golden bikini,
Oh, okay.
but I did the buns.
I'll get that image out.
But
of
I'm
my head.
like, but like when people are late to a Zoom call, it should be like, whoosh, like holodeck. Whoosh. That's Star Wars, Star Trek. But like
Yeah.
it would be so cool. Like you could do so many cool things with Zoom and
Animations. Yeah.
right, like just
Yeah.
cool. Psh, psh, psh. And now we have like the big thing was like blurred backgrounds or like funky
Yes.
backgrounds, right? And I think telco's right in the heart of this.
Right.
Lean into it. You guys are looking.
Do better.
Yeah.
So to wrap it up, unless you've got anything else
No,
to add,
that
'cause
was
I know
my big
I know
idea.
we're out of time. I think, we know that we've still got some residual adversarial stuff on the matter of these big companies having so much power, but I think, I only speak for myself, but I suspect I speak for Iain, that on the matter of telcos doing a better job of getting involved in all this emerging stuff, the services being more than the dumb pipe, I think we all
Yeah,
agree.
I mean,
with
I
that.
think we all stay in business if they win. So
Yes.
Well,
we
that-
want them to
that
win.
would be nice as
right,
well.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
We could write about them, and they need to start jumping on these ideas and participating. And I think I see a lot of executives kind of whining about how regulated they are. I'm like, you can participate in the metaverse. You can build applications right? But you got to to build the metaverse out, I think you do need to use the hyperscalers capability, right?
Yeah.
You need to, right? And so you got,
but it's not either or.
and you can't start with the metaverse. You got to start with the stupid, dumb, lame IT application, and you got to hire a guy, and you got to start learning about it. So get going.
Cool.
Sweet.
Great note on which to end. Thank you very much, Danielle. It's been a pleasure.
Super fun. I had a
Cheers.
blast. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll wrap it up there. Thanks a lot for watching, and make sure you join us for the next one.